Good morning or good afternoon, everyone, wherever you happen to be at the moment. Welcome. Bonjour et bienvenue. Thank you for joining us today for this meeting of the College of Patent Agents and Trademark Agents. Merci de vous joindre à nous aujourd'hui pour cette réunion du conseil d'administration du collège. I'd like to begin our meeting by acknowledging that the college is the federal regulator of patent agents and trademark agents, with staff and licensees and directors living and working throughout Canada. And Canada is part of Turtle Island, the lands of North America that have been inhabited by Indigenous people from time immemorial. And today, although we meet virtually, our meeting place remains the home of many Indigenous people, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to live and work in this land. As CPATA regulates licensed patent agents and trademark agents, it's also important for us to acknowledge that concepts of and rights in idea ownership may differ across cultures, and that our global intellectual property system may not adequately protect and promote important forms of Indigenous traditional knowledge and cultural expression. Alors que nous nous réunissons aujourd'hui et entreprenons notre travail de réglementation, j'invite tout le monde à envisager comment nous pouvons contribuer dans le cadre de notre mandat à la réconciliation avec les peuples autochtones qui sont les gardiens traditionnels de ces terres. I'm very pleased to welcome two new directors to the board. We welcome Iris Elmida Cote and Amber Batul. With this appointment, the Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry, the Honorable François-Philippe Champagne, has fully constituted CPATA's board of directors in accordance with the Act, and the board now includes 4 elected licensee directors and 5 appointed non-licensee directors. Bienvenue à Iris et Amber. Iris holds a number of distinguished academic professional degrees and designation, is a certified corporate director and the CEO of Innova Connect, Inc., offering strategic management services. She is a jurist, and she has familiarity with the changing legislative and regulatory frameworks in which we are operating, and she is celebrated for her innovations. Iris has been twice recognized as one of the top 10 most powerful women in Canada, and she has formerly sat on our Audit and Risk Committee. Amber Batul is the Executive Director, Global Investments Banking at CIBC. In her previous role, she led the first published intellectual property strategy for the Organization of Sustainable Development Technology Canada. She has deep networks in the intellectual property community and has presented at many events, including the Canadian Intellectual Property Office's conference. Amber has been a member of CPATA's governance committee since 2022. So we are really delighted and pleased to welcome these two very distinguished Canadians to our board. And I would like to speak for a moment about the examination results. En tant que président du conseil d'administration, je souhaite féliciter tous les titulaires de permis de catégorie 3 qui ont réussi aux examens de compétences en 2022. 25 candidates were successful on the trademark agent qualifying examination, and 27 candidates were successful on the patent agent qualifying examination. We wish these licensees success in the next phase of their careers. A word about insurance. I'd also like to thank all licensees for submitting their professional liability insurance information to CPATA before the December 31st deadline. L'assurance constitue un instrument de protection de l'intérêt du public important à la portée du collège. We remain sensitive, however, to the fact that duplicate insurance costs remain an issue for many IP agent lawyers. And CPATA continues to communicate with lawyer professional liability insurers and other insurers to attempt to minimize the barriers to practice for co-regulated licensees in provinces where their law society insurance does not meet the college's minimum requirements. So I'd like to just speak very briefly to a couple of projects that the college is working on. The staff and the board of CPATA have been very busy with a number of initiatives, including several matters where there are related materials in the for information section of today's board materials. The result of CPATA's licensee survey, completed by over 500 licensees in the fall of 2022, are now publicly available online. This survey helps the college better understand the nature of intellectual property practice in Canada as we continue to develop right touch regulation of patent agents, trademark agents, and licensing candidates. We have also developed a consultation framework to ensure that we hear from important stakeholders with whom the college interacts on key policy decisions that could affect the public or our licensees. So we will be introducing this consultation process for the first time this month. CPATA has created a paper entitled Regulating in the Public Interest to describe how we view our responsibilities and what we concretely mean when we say we regulate in the public interest. And anyone can provide feedback on this paper by email at info@CPATA-CABAMC.ca before April the 30th, and we welcome your feedback. On the conduct and discipline front, CPATA's discipline committee has developed and published an online toolkit housing all of the policies and procedures adopted by the committee, which will govern its first virtual discipline hearing scheduled for this spring. With respect to the investigations committee, I wish to inform you that the investigations committee has filed a notice of application with the discipline committee under section 49(1) of the Act in relation to regulations of professional misconduct involving Alpesh Patel of Toronto, Ontario, who is a suspended Class 1 licensee. Now, on licensee renewal, CPATA is currently in the middle of its second annual license renewal process, which opened on February 15. Class 1 and 2 licensees are reminded to log into the licensee portal before March 31st to renew their license and respond to the mandatory declaration questions. The annual general meeting of the college will take place in Ottawa on Thursday, May 25 from 4 to 5 p.m. All are welcome in person, and the meeting will be live streamed via Zoom for those who wish to watch online. L'Assemblée générale annuelle du collège aura lieu à Ottawa le jeudi 25 mai de 13h et 16h. Tous sont les bienvenus en personne, et la réunion sera diffusée en direct via Zoom pour ceux qui souhaitent regarder en ligne. And finally, I want to publicly acknowledge and thank our Vice Chair, Ruth McHugh, for stepping into my role as the chair for the last several months, and especially during our last meeting. As I've had to commit my time and effort to my law practice, unfortunately. So Ruth, who I know has been very busy with her own work, stepped in without complaint and picked up the reins at a very important time in the college's evolution. So I want to thank Ruth very much and and just again give her publicly acknowledge her great work for the college. So with those remarks, let us now turn to the agenda. Maintenant, à travail. So the first item on the agenda is the conflicts of interest declarations. So we have adopted a practice where, and a policy indeed, where if there are any matters on the agenda that may raise a conflict of interest, directors are asked to make a declaration to that effect and not to participate in the debate about that item. And I have not received any indication from anyone before the meeting that there is any conflict posed by any of the matters on the agenda, but I want to confirm that with all of the members of the board today before proceeding. Does anyone have any concerns about any conflicts with respect to the agenda items today? Hearing none then, let's proceed with the consent agenda. The board has adopted the common practice of approving consent agenda items by unanimous consent without debate. Directors may seek clarification or ask questions without removing the matter from the consent agenda. Directors may also request that a consent item be moved to the regular agenda by notifying the chair before the meeting or to make a request at the meeting itself. So with those remarks, there are two items on the consent agenda: the minutes of the board December 15th of 2020. You can find those at pages 4 through 6 of the materials, and the report of the governance committee of March 2nd, 2023 at pages 7 and 8. So does any director wish to have any of the matters removed from the consent agenda, or wish to seek clarification or ask any questions about any of the any information contained in those two consent agenda items? Okay, hearing none, hearing no question.
I just wanted to point out, my apologies, this is my error, I think, on the agenda. It should actually say the 2023 February 6th Governance Committee report, not 2022, 2023. Okay. My apologies on that, not last year, this year.
Okay. So
yes, thank you.
Yes, I caught that. I thought it was 2023. That's great. Okay, well, with that friendly amendment, then I don't think there are any objections. So we will take the vote. All in favor of approving the consent agenda? Any opposed? I don't think I see any opposed. Okay, that is carried. And now we will move to the meat and potatoes of the meeting, starting with the governance matrix. So at item 3.1, we have a proposed amendment to the Audit and Risk Committee terms of reference, and Ruth McHugh will be addressing this item. Ruth.
Thanks very much, Tom. In the Governance Committee report that was part of our consent agenda, there was a Governance Committee recommendation to update the Audit and Risk Committee terms of reference. What I'm wondering, Tom, do we need a motion to approve this update to their terms of reference? I didn't see that in the report, but you'd think we would.
Right, but
sorry, the motion is at the report at page 9 of the materials, and apologies for not including it in the agenda up front.
Yeah, I kind of wondered about that, given that it was part of a consent agenda, but it contained motions happening during the meeting. So just all of those governance experts out there, you can just let us know exactly what we need to do. So if we do need a motion, let's go ahead and make that motion.
Let's do it. Let's do the motion. It's in its report. Let's do the motion.
Yeah. The recommendation is in the
report. We'll make sure that the minutes reflect that we're actually going to be adopting this motion arising out of this report.
Yeah, that sounds good, Tom. So I'll just, for the record, I'll just read the
Yeah, please
recommendation
do.
of the governance committee. Yeah, the governance committee, in consultation with the chair of the audit and risk committee, recommends amending the terms of reference to permit up to 2 directors to serve on the committee. This approach balances the committee between director and non-director members. It permits enhanced board input into the committee's work and increases alignment between the committee and the board. It also avoids the need to recruit for the committee at this time. So that is the recommendation. I'm opening the floor to any questions. All right, if not, could I have someone make the motion to approve that? Leonora, thank you. And a seconder. Andrew, thank you. All in favor? Perfect.
Okay.
That motion is carried. Thank you. The next, sorry, Tom. I was jumping ahead to the next.
We're going to go
governance
now.
committee.
Yeah, please go ahead. And the motion there is, be it resolved that the terms of reference for the governance committee be amended to provide the committee chair is a director of the board.
Yes, exactly.
So
and that's really.
You want to address the substance of this, of why this motion is being made, and then we can get a second for we can have it moved and seconded.
Yeah, exactly, Tom. That is, there's a provision under the section describing the chair that wasn't clear before, and we are now clarifying that 2 things: the chair and members of the governance committee are appointed by the board, and secondly, that the committee chair is a director and is a voting member of the committee. Those are 2 good clarifications to have in the terms of reference that weren't in there before. So there's no need for the chair of the governance committee to be the vice chair of the board, but the chair of the governance committee does need to be a director and is a full voting member on the committee. So those are the clarifications and the recommendations of the governance committee. I would like to again open the floor for any questions.
Yes. So it's this is really Ruth in the nature of a kind of a mid-course correction. It's not a substantive change, really. It's just a glitch that's being ironed out.
You're exactly right, Tom. When we were looking at the terms of reference, we realized that, oops, it doesn't actually specify those specific things, and it should. So we've tidied it up. All right, and I see no questions. So
okay,
therefore,
can we have a mover and a seconder then for the motion? Iris, Leonora seconding. All right, all in favor? No one opposed, so that's carried. All right. Next, we have that's your items, the next item as well, Ruth, I believe.
those were the 2, the amendments.
That's correct. Okay,
yeah.
so.
Yeah, so the remaining matter from governance, Tom, is something that arises out of the discipline committee.
And that's for you.
And so I was going to provide the background, but you have it with a memo at page 11 of the materials. From the memo prepared by Victoria Reese, our manager of professional responsibility. The motion is that the terms of reference and skills matrix of the discipline committee be amended as per the revised versions at Appendix A and B to the memo. But these are really housekeeping amendments. Since as a matter of process, the board does approve these. They are back to you, but the key changes are that the discipline committee originally considered delegating certain authorities to its chair to make certain decisions on his own. And ultimately that was walked back, but for one minor area where the chair will retain some discretion. There's an update piece about maintaining separation of duties and institutional supports as necessary. So there are going to be new resources that we are putting online for when hearings occur. And so the discipline proceedings coordinator has been created. It's basically a part-time role at the moment. When there are hearings, we need somebody to help coordinate that. We are using existing staff to fill that gap. And the skills matrix has been amended, which is the second part that goes to a motion item, to add certain criteria that are needed for the skills matrix, including bilingualism, and under knowledge, reference to patent office and patent agent manuals and related IP areas of expertise. And so those are the main amendments that the committee has requested that the board approve for them to be in effect.
Okay. Open it up for discussion. Yes, Leonora?
Yeah, I guess I just had one. I think the changes are great, Judah, but I just had one question, and that is, given the majority of people on the discipline committee are not licensees, is there a plan in place to address how they acquire the knowledge of the Canadian Patent and Trademark Office manuals of practice? Particularly, I mean, the acts is one thing, but the manuals are pretty
Technical.
a lot of practice courses.
So at the moment, all I can say is that there is an ongoing continuous training regimen that we are working with the discipline committee on. I can't speak to whether those specific knowledge areas are part of their upcoming program, but one of the gaps that was identified earlier was just making sure that adjudicators were familiar with the lay of the land of IP practice, and they had some initial trainings on that. I will confer with Victoria, who is basically leading the policy side assistance to the committee, and relay that concern or question. And we're continuing to build out their training for the year. So if it's okay with you, I'll take it as a point taken that we should be looking at how we make sure that the IP expertise generally is part of the training curriculum, including perhaps these manuals.
And just as a follow-up, I mean, the competency frameworks that we'll get to later on for patent agents and trademark agents, that will be very helpful, but that really is the way it's been drafted. The framework is you need to have knowledge of these, as opposed to what's in those manuals, which is this is the procedure you have to follow. I mean, this is what the law says, and this is how we do it at CPO, right? So, and that's really important when we're talking about discipline. If the law says one thing and CPO happens to interpret it, for example, in a different way, the fact that you follow the manual is very important, I believe. Thank you.
Great, thank you. That's a very, very useful comment, and we will. I think Judah's going to take that on board. Staff's going to take that on board. So I guess we'll hear a little bit more about that at some future meeting. How that concern gets expressed or resolved. Okay. Any other comments on the changes or any questions about the changes? I just don't see anybody else's hand up. All right. I did actually have one question, and that there seems to be like I'm not sure what the rationale is for the change with respect to moving decisions that were previously made by one person to the panel. This is not explained. Now maybe there's a reason it's not explained, but like I'm looking at quorum. It says the committee has determined that other than administrative decisions made as a result of pre-hearing conferences led by the committee chair, enunciated in policy, all other decisions will be made by the appointed panels. What the section therefore has removed reference to decisions made by the chair only. It's not, the rationale isn't explained as to why that change was necessary.
So it's my understanding, Chair, that as a matter of practice, there were the possibilities for sort of chair alone matters on interim bases, but as a practice and as a reality to date, the matters that one would contemplate might need to get managed through have come up in times where the entirety of the committee as appointed for the hearing are there, and they think that just seems to be working, and that's my understanding of the change to date.
Thank you. All right, that's fine. So does anyone else have any comment or question before we put we get a motion for we have the motion put to the board for approval? Okay, do we have I don't see anybody else's hands up, so again, the motion is, be it resolved that the terms of reference and skills matrix for the discipline committee be amended as per the attached revised versions of Appendix A and Appendix B to this memorandum, which is the memorandum of Victoria Rees dated February 23rd, 2023. Do I have a mover for the motion? I don't have a mover for the motion. Okay, you're Iris and Ruth. Sorry, somebody else. Did somebody else get there? I can't see anybody.
Yeah, it's hard to see, Tom, but Amber ended.
Oh, Amber. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I don't have a. Sorry, I've got this. I can't get the full screen here. So
yeah, it's hard, isn't it?
Maybe I'm gonna put the gallery. That's what I need to do. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. That's better. Okay, so all in favor? Okay, none opposed. Carried. Thank you. So next we will go to just get back to here.
Tom, if I may, just while you're looking for that, I just wanted to let you know that our colleague Karima, unfortunately, is stuck in an elevator and has been now for quite a long time. She's in a hotel in an elevator. She has her phone and has been texting with me, so she was able to dial in with her Ontario. Sorry.
Oh my God!
Well, not at all. She's
what? No, I know. Like that would be the last thing I'd be doing is dialing into the meeting if I was stuck in an elevator.
But she has dialed. She dialed in probably very soon after we started, and so she can listen to the dialogue. But she isn't in as a panelist, so she's just been communicating with me through text because she does happen to have her Ontario cell phone with her. So I share that with you so that you know that I'm keeping, Karima is staying as much in the loop as she can, and once they rescue her, she'll log in as a full panelist. So FYI.
Well, okay. Well, let's keep her in mind then as we go through. Okay, thank you.
Yes, I am. I'm trying. I am doing that. So.
All right.
So
great.
Heroic moves by a board member to join us in our board meeting. So that's all. Just wanted to share that.
Good. So now we'll move to item 4.1 on the agenda, which is the approval of the technical competency profiles. And this item is going to be presented by Jennifer Salbutkin. Jennifer?
Thank you so much, Tom. Well, I can't believe it's been almost a year to the day, actually, that we originally presented the competency initiative to the board and received your endorsement to proceed. So I am pleased to present the technical competency profiles for patent agents and trademark agents. Phase 1 of the competency initiative project is considered complete. I'm also pleased to report that we were able to stay on schedule and on budget for this component of the initiative. The profiles and the memo describe the process that we used in conjunction with our consultant, Principia Assessments, and our subject matter experts to draft and validate these profiles. Now, just as a reminder, a competency profile is a set of competencies that an individual needs to do a particular job, and competencies are knowledge, skills, and attributes needed to perform an activity to an accepted standard, each expressed as a short sentence that defines what a competent practitioner can do. So other than the actual content itself, the most important component of creating a competency profile is the process itself. Over the next few minutes, I'm going to highlight some of the key aspects of the process, which I hope provide reassurance to the board that it is representative of what IP agents are expected to do at the entry to practice level. The first component that I wanted to discuss was the robust level of licensee participation in the drafting and development process. This is critical to confirming that the knowledge concepts, competencies, and overall expectations that are presented in the profiles actually make sense and resonate with practitioners. We had 17 practicing licensees participate on the development working groups. Recruitment was open to all practicing licensees, and we received a significant number of expressions of interest. When putting together the groups, the goal was to represent the diversity of the profession and include perspectives that had been historically excluded. The dimensions considered included language, gender, practice location, practice context, practice area and industry, various skills, backgrounds, and career paths, time in practice, and diverse racialized perspectives and lived experiences. The second component that I wanted to discuss related to the bilingual equivalence process. We are all aware of CPATA's Official Languages Act obligations, and so it was incredibly important to us that the competency profiles meant the same thing in English as that they did in French. So 7 bilingual practitioners were recruited to review the translations to identify potential French language and culture issues. The third component involved internal consultation. Before the large-scale validation survey was conducted, the board, all CPATA committees, and that included governance committees as well as regulatory committees, and exam board members were invited to review the knowledge concepts and competencies. The feedback that we received during the translation review and internal consultation processes were reviewed by the working groups and edits were made as needed. The fourth component was the profession's opportunity to provide feedback and validate the work of the subject matter expert groups through the external validation survey. This online survey was open for about a month, and all licensees from all classes were invited to participate. We circulated the links to the survey via a dedicated email and reminded licensees that the survey was open during our monthly newsletter. We presented at the 2022 IPIC conference in Whistler and reminded licensees that the survey was open and that we really needed their input to validate the competencies. IPIC was also helped us by including a general message about the competency survey in their newsletter during that time. Now, the validation survey was set up to capture data regarding importance and criticality for various knowledge concepts and competencies. The source data needed for the validation calculations required individual licensee submissions. For this reason, it was important that the consultative components were focused on obtaining feedback directly from individual licensees. Apologize, my cat is joining in this conversation. Our psychometrician at Principia crunched all of the numbers that we got from the surveys using 2 different approaches. The direct ratings approach helped identify respondents' perceptions of relative criticality, and the performance criteria data helped identify relative criticality of each high-level competency area based on the number and criticality of performance criteria for that area. Now, as a reminder, a performance criterion is a specific behavior that an individual must engage in to show their competence in the area outlined by a competency. Together, performance criteria capture various aspects of competency, thereby contributing to its full description. Now, these approaches, when taken together, support a balanced view of high-level competencies, which considered both perceptions of overall criticality and the fact that different competencies reflected a different number of performance criteria of varying significance. Now, professional foundations and some underlying concepts were identified through the survey as potentially missing from these profiles. But as you know, the professional foundations competencies is a separate project, which is scheduled to start later this year, and will cover those areas. And the underlying concepts were considered, but it was determined that these shouldn't be included in the current iteration of the profiles because the specifics of those concepts were not clearly represented in the comments that we received, and there was no clear consensus as to what specific underlying concepts ought to be reflected in the profiles at this time. So at their December 2022 meeting, the registration committee considered all of the background information, all of the reports, all of the validation data, and approved the competency profiles for the purposes of setting standards for the evaluation of the competencies that are assessed by the exams. They agreed that the profiles should be reviewed every 5 to 7 years or sooner if needed to capture changes in practice. Now, the key takeaway from a process perspective is that we employed an evidence-based professional regulation approach that incorporated best practices for psychometric defensibility, and we sought licensee participation and feedback at multiple points along the way. Finally, I just wanted to briefly reiterate why this initiative and this phase was so critically important for CPATA. To begin, it sets a foundation for entry to practice licensing requirements, and it supports fair registration principles of transparency, objectivity, impartiality, and fairness for our registration and education programs. It allows for a detailed blueprint or recipe called a test specification with which new knowledge and skills exams will be aligned to be developed. And detailed item development assignments and guidelines for exam board members who develop these items and questions can be provided, as well as more general information can be posted on our website for candidates so they can see the approximate weightings for various components of the exams. It provides guidance for training supervisors, training offices, prospective agents and prospective agents in training and current agents in training regarding what we expect them to learn, what we expect them to teach, and what we expect them to be able to demonstrate at the minimum competent level so that we are assured that they can practice as IP agents. It also clarifies expectations and remove some of that moving target mentality that was employed previously, not out of anybody's fault of their own, just because there hadn't been anything concrete to really be following. So it introduces consistency and mitigates variation amongst training experiences. Secondly, it provides a baseline for minimum competence, which can be used for professional responsibility matters and can now be actually tied to the code of conduct. There's an entire section on competence in the code of conduct, and now we have a tangible understanding of what that looks like and what that means for IP agents. Third, it provides curriculum to course and education providers. They can now develop programs that support pathways to licensure. And finally, it sets the stage for success in Canada's IP strategy. The public will have access to a pool of competent agents who are best positioned to protect their IP rights. That's all I got. Any questions or concerns?
Jen, I don't, Mr. Chair, may I offer?
Yes, please, go ahead. Go ahead.
Thank you. Jen, it's not a question of concern. It's like, oh my gosh, huge kudos to you and the team for putting this together. It was just fantastic. And I really appreciated the memo that you provided to us with the pre-reading. It was really thorough. This is such an excellent gold standard process for a competency initiative. So well done. I have to say, I particularly appreciated the stakeholder usefulness chart that you included in the memo. That really brought it home as to how this is going to help diverse groups that, to your earlier point, that might not have been considered before. So really well done. Thanks so much for leading it, Jen.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Okay, so and do we have anyone else with their hand up or want to jump in here? Yes, Andrew, please go ahead. You'll have to turn your camera. Yes, thanks. Go ahead.
Could you elaborate a bit more on the foundations initiative and what's involved there, and just to help me understand that a bit more?
Sure. Yeah. So the professional foundations competencies, they kind of are alluded to a little bit in the current technical competency profile. I'm just going to try to find the page that it was on. Okay, so on page 37 of 56 in the package, it alludes to some of the professional foundations. And as it says here that this list is for illustrative purposes and expected to change. And so that kind of gives a little bit of a sense of what the professional foundations are going to include. But the actual project itself will be similar to the technical competency profiles in starting with a baseline. So there are other professional foundation competency profiles that we can use as a starting point. So we're not, reinventing the wheel from scratch. Then we're going to go through a similar recruitment process to identify participants, licensees who will be on working groups to work through validating those kind of starting points, and then further differentiate if there's any specific IP agent related professional competencies that need to be dealt with. Then it'll go through very similar bilingual review and translation process and the stakeholder validation process as well. So it will be very similar in terms of process to the technical competency profiles. It's just the subject matter will be less about what an actual trademark agent or patent agent specifically will do in practice, and more about things like how to communicate effectively, how to collaborate effectively. And that will be for both patent agents and trademark agents.
May I continue there? So,
Yes, please.
So, just 1 second. This is amazing, and I've been lots of us in the profession watching for years, and I remember going through the exam process, and I remember feeling it being very arbitrary, and I still have my own unique story about how I squeaked through, and it differed from the standard exam. So, having sort of been through the ringer, and then also now, as someone managing a firm and trying to bring trainees along, it's extremely challenging, it's extremely hard, it's extremely expensive, it's frustrating, it's hard for the trainees, it's hard for the firm. So I really just, there's like a huge sigh of relief that this is being done and this is happening. It's I'm extremely grateful. There's a but coming, and it's a polite and it really is meant with deference, because you've consulted with so many people. I'm just one person out there with thought processes and things. Like, I think honestly, everything down there, you've nailed it. The foundational stuff that I worry is missing is, where does the patent system come from in the first place? Where does the trademark system come from in the first place? And the bargain theory line in Canada, and as well as, of course, the trademark system coming out of mid 1600s, and all of it, you know, an evolution out of the Industrial Revolution, and blah 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 blah. And part of the reason why that I think is so important is because those are the things that transcend changes to legislation, to rules, and also allow us to transfer our skills across jurisdictions, so that if we have those absolute foundational concepts, bargain theory being the anchor one in patents, when you have to go and navigate specifically the United States, which those of us who are Canadian agents are automatically allowed to do. But even when we're trying to understand what our European colleagues are telling us, or our Chinese colleagues are telling us, that theoretical foundation, at least in my experience, is very critical to practicing at the highest standards. But I don't want to take away from them, because this has been put together by a much bigger group than me. I'm one person, but I'm hoping that I'm adding some useful thought into the conversation, and I'll stop there.
So I'm going to Judah.
So Andrew, it's a very excellent point, and I think that's part of the challenge, is trying to understand which parts are going to go where, and without seeing all of the competencies all at once, it's trickier. We started with the technical competencies, and I say that as the global we, because obviously the hard lifting all predated me, and it is all Jen and my predecessor Daryl Pink who take full credit for this. But we started with the technical side. And the competencies there, and they will no doubt address some of the pieces of theory will come into play as people explore the substantive knowledge they need to acquire in order to become entry-level competent, or just simply competent IP agents, because that's really what these standards do. What we expect is that in the professional phase that will come next, there will be a range of different other topics that will be included. Some of them will be what some people describe as the softer skills, the more universal skills, I think is a way of describing them. Things like cultural competency, things like self-awareness into one's levels of stress, anxiety, mental health, potential biases that one brings into problem solving, into client relationships, effective communication with clients, use of tickler systems, time management systems, practice management systems, whichever term of art works for you or your firm. But there will also be other pieces too that are on the ethical side. And the ethical side is really about IP agents and our IP system. And there are ethical questions that start about, what is this bargain that we have? And what is it that IP is intended to do? And what are some of its limits, which I think those who may be in the system are still fully willing to recognize that there are limits to what IP can do. For example, as we noted at the outset of this meeting, and as IPIC has noted in some of its materials, there's still work to be done to understand where there are limitations in IP in terms of how we treat intangible rights compared to certain indigenous ways of looking at collective rights, or at what in a Western system may be seen as intellectual property. So there's going to be pieces that are going to be built out. But in this exercise, as Jen alluded to, really the focus was on the technical pieces. And so when asking just around mostly that, it wasn't the right time to go back and say, okay, here are all these other pieces, including some of the background theory that would infuse into the foundation course on the professional piece. And so I expect that's going to come. I expect that bargain theory will be addressed expressly. Would be my guess. We're going to go and test against against IP agent tendencies and understandings, but it's such a fundamental part of where you start the IP discussion that I would expect it to be part of the program at the end of the day.
Okay, so we actually have a list here. So I'm just going to ask everybody to make sure you consider your remarks, because we got lots on the agenda still, and we have to move on. But I'm going to start with you, Andrew, to finish up. We'll go to Jennifer, I think, who probably wants to comment on this, and then Leonora, because she's been waiting in the wings very patiently. So where you go, Andrew.
So just that I noticed that, for example, the trademark list does include history, but I would have thought there would be a parallel line for patents. And if you put the word history in there, you're going to touch bargain theory. The other one is the comments about teaching strategy and strategy skills. Patent system intersects with antitrust system. If you want to do a good job with client strategy, I think you have to have those foundational theoretical fundamentals in place. And I did hear you go and list off a bunch of other items. I think they're great. I would still put those more in the competencies rather than that foundational. But I think I've said my piece, and thank you very much for the space and the time to do so.
Thank you, Andrew. That's great. So Jennifer, did you want to pick up here? Was it you're commenting on the conversation so far? Okay, great. Go ahead.
Just really briefly, to Andrew's point, I think he kind of said it himself, is that the point for this exercise was consensus by the profession. And so some of these underlying concepts, there wasn't consensus through that validation process on some of these things. And so that's why they weren't included in the profile. But to your point, and to Judith's point as well, there are other yeah, to yours and Judith's point as well, though, there are other components of the licensure process that we have an opportunity to provide, to include some of these other components in. So for example, the bylaws provide for an agent training course, and it is not specified what has to be included or excluded in that. And so the agent training course might include things like ethics modules, or maybe some of that historical underlying concepts that didn't come through the competency profile project. So I just wanted to point out that there are other opportunities for us to look at some of these underlying concepts, to revalidate them, to see if they resonate with the profession, and then to incorporate them into other aspects.
So this is a work in progress, but so far the work in progress is excellent work in progress. I think that's the message I'm getting. But Leonora, you wanted to jump in, please go ahead. It's over to you now.
Yeah, thank you. So I only had one comment before, but now I have two. So
oh, good. So well, you get two for the price of one. There you go.
There we go. So just to address Andrew's second point about not having the historical basis, I definitely think on the patent side, we didn't put in the term history, the working groups that I was on, but it definitely, we were trying to be broader based in terms of knowledge of international requirements and foreign law, and of the foundational, like the treaty foundations for the patent system, as well as other intellectual property systems. So absolutely, this is a work in progress and can be filled out more. Everybody doesn't have the benefit of Bill Hayhurst's first year or his IP course at U of T's law school, but hopefully we can get there.
I think I might take it.
He unfortunately, unless someone's
I should take it. No, I can't take it. Okay, sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
The other comment, really to fill out your first comment on the foundational competencies, and this is more for Jennifer. So Jennifer, when you're thinking, and Judah, when you're thinking about what kinds of people will make up those working groups, are you thinking more broadly than licensees? Because I mean, I'm a lawyer as well, and there was some practice management thing when I was in the bar admission course that absolutely did nothing for me. And I think you want people who aren't necessarily all licensees commenting on that, and not even all lawyers either, because there's a lot of competency out there that we could benefit from. That's beyond like office practice, and that as licensees we could benefit from. That's not, even though I know that Andrew's firm is excellently run, I think there's things that we could all benefit from.
Yeah.
So that's just a thought there, just to keep an open mind about who participates.
Fair comment, very good comment. All right, anyone else wants to comment on this item before we put the motion? No? Okay, so I'm just going to remind everybody, so we'll have to move along here, but just to get to the meat of so the motion again, the motion again is to find that. Oh dear. Wrong. This shouldn't be this hard, folks, but I just lost my place here. So again,
Page 21 of the package, I think.
thank you.
Tom, I've put it in the chat for you.
Yeah, it is. Be it resolved that the board adopted technical competency profiles for patent agents and trademark agents as presented and recommended by the registration committee. Do I have a mover?
I'll move. It's Karima.
Leonora and sorry.
It's Karima. I'll second. I'm finally on.
Okay.
Oh, hello, Karima. Are you out of the elevator?
I am. I'm just trying to compose myself.
Oh, so am I. And I'm not in an elevator, so. Okay, thank you, Karima. So all in favor, please? None opposed? Okay, carried, thank you. Okay, you're up next to talk about unauthorized practice, Judah. That's the next item on the agenda, so it's over to you.
Thank you, Tom. This is a general oral update for the board and for the public. In one of our meetings late last year, we had received a submission from IPIC that was well crafted and described some of the issues around unauthorized practice and encouraging CPATA to consider that part of its public interest protection mandate and public protection mandate should be to consider unauthorized practice and take steps where necessary. I've since, and at that time, there was a request that the CEO consult with ISED, with CEPA, with IPIC, with stakeholders, and come back by this meeting with a policy or a memo. But ultimately, the timing was not great to do that. And part of that reason for that was events. We actually did receive word through our various intake means of an unauthorized practice issue, which we decided at an initial triage level was worthy of further investigation. We have been taking steps to learn through this live case about the sorts of marketing, the sorts of representations to the public, the sorts of areas where there may be market confusion, and what types of avenues, including direct correspondence with the party of concern, can be used to hopefully narrow issues or remove them entirely. I won't give any specifics about the case. I think it is safe to say that it is likely a well-known one within the IP agent professions, as it came to our attention through more than one channel. But ultimately, we are still in that process and learning as we go. So I was hoping to use that opportunity as well as an upcoming opportunity that I'm happy has been extended to me through IPIC to meet with one of their committees that have studied unauthorized practice. And that will help inform some of our thinking around where, how, when we might be involved with unauthorized practice initiatives and how, because there are real ranges from trying to throw a book at somebody to more educational efforts. And so I'm looking forward to those discussions with IPIC. I'm looking forward to future discussions with ISED and CPO, but recognizing, as this board did back when it looked at this matter in late 2022, at first glance, that there are some legislative restrictions, and unauthorized practice is a tricky area to right size, given the nature of our regulatory powers, given the shared powers that CPO and others have, and given the narrow exclusive area of practice held by IP agents. So there are some balancing factors to consider. And of course, one of the large ones is cost of regulation, because to investigate each claim or each complaint that would come in can become a costly exercise, and going to federal court for remedies can be a very costly exercise as well. So all this to say, it is still on the agenda. It is still on my radar. But I am asking the board for its patience here, because this is one that we don't want to jump into with policy that might constrain our options inadvertently by acting too quickly, as we're still getting our sea legs in the investigation and disciplines areas of our professional regulatory mandate. So that's the update. So I've made it absolutely clear to all that unauthorized practice may at times be an area where we do need to get involved. There's certainly one that has come to light. We are dealing with it right now. But whether we need, or what kind of policy response we may require at this point, we just need a bit more time to consider it. Thank you.
Okay, so let's open this up for discussion then, as is indicated on the agenda. I'm sure that the board is very interested in this subject. It is a subject that's of interest to our licensees, obviously, and the fact that there actually is a development on the ground as we speak that is of concern to our management is obviously, raises this issue for us again. So it's timely for us to open up the discussion and see what the take the temperature of the board, if you will, on this subject. So please, anyone? Well, I guess it's probably lukewarm, I guess, surprisingly.
So Tom, if I may.
Go ahead, Ruth.
So Judah, just so that you know, I certainly support the approach that you're taking. You're taking an extremely thoughtful approach that is looking at all of the diverse issues out there around this particular, as you mentioned, very tricky topic. As well, you're considering what is the scope of our authority as a regulator in dealing with these things. You're also considering the very real issue of we are a startup organization with a very thin financial ground that we're trying to build this thing on, right? And something like unauthorized practice can literally hoover up financial and staff resources. And so I'm really glad that you're taking a thoughtful approach to determining what will our policy, what will you be recommending to this board in terms of policy around unauthorized practice. So kudos to you for all of the work that you're doing. It's careful, it's thoughtful, it's inclusive, and I really appreciate it. So thanks, Judah.
Yes, so you're advocating a prudent approach, Judah, which I think is something obviously that I think what I'm hearing so far is the board seems to be on board with that. So Jeff's got his hand up. Please, Jeff, over to you.
Yeah, my input was simply to respond to your comment that this was a lukewarm topic, Tom. We've talked about it many times. Yeah, and so I really wanted to address that. It's obviously one of concern. I think that there's clearly a public interest that served in not having the general public hoodwinked by people that portray themselves as capable of doing this work. And I think that everything that Judah mentioned in terms of the steps that he's taking are all in the right direction. So I'm sure that IPIC has some very interesting input, having studied this over time. And I find that sort of IPIC's input on these things are sort of middle of the road. It's not necessarily taking the side of profession or taking the side of anyone in particular, but really trying to protect that public interest. So I invite you to speak to them, and be happy to weigh in if you have any questions that I can help with.
Great. So anyone else want to? Yes, Andrew, please.
Yeah, I think the not lukewarm, sort of speechless, that kind of deer in the headlights, the highlights of the enormous amount of resources that would go into actually pursuing this, whereas the college has so many other initiatives that are so important right now, and yet at the same time, our friends at IPIC, have flagged this. They clearly believe there's a concern there, and they're looking to us for some directional leadership. So I'll probably just say, echoing Jeffrey is saying, this is that I am looking forward to the work they're doing, and Jude, I appreciate the direction that you're taking us in to come at it very, very thoughtfully. We do take it seriously. We're very proud of the profession. We want the profession to be recognized and protect the public most and first and foremost. And but this isn't. There's no snap of the fingers here, I think.
So it's not, but it was a timely conversation that we had with IPIC at the start, and I continue to have good conversations with them. Part of what sometimes is masked by all the work and the website and all the rest of it is just how small the organization still is, and it's still startup phase. It's still in a build phase. We only have 6 full-time staff. We have no dedicated full-time staff to investigations and discipline. These are part-time consultant experts who are helping us on the way on that. We have not yet staffed up to full capacity, which could be necessary sooner than later in the build if unauthorized practice were to become a significant area of regulatory activity for us. And so that's part of the balance. Is it's still relatively early days, and we've still we are still flying a very light, very minimum viable in terms of what's been accomplished so far. I would say that the staff and governors have punched well above weight class given budget so far. We will continue to explore it, and I'm really looking forward to learning more about the area. I think it is one, like many other areas of professional regulation, where there's probably lots of truth in the gray, and we'll continue to explore it.
And who knows, your continuing exploration of the subject may produce some low-hanging fruit that we can deal with, or that you can deal with at an operational level. Correct.
I mean, one of the good news possibilities here is it sounds like from this initial investigation, we have been able to use education with someone who likely appears to have not intended to stray offside our requirements and will be making changes or has undertaken to do so. And so there may be light touch approaches that result in better, transparent, verifiable representations to the public about IP services that are not, in fact, IP agent services, where there may have been misleading remarks prior to our involvement. Those sorts of lighter touch interactions can be helpful, but we'll have to wait and see, of course, because people are people.
Good. Any other comments or questions, concerns before we move on?
Tom, if I may, I think just to feather in on something that Jen talked about earlier in terms of the initiative that she was describing to us with her competency work, is that Jen, similar to what you were talking about with the, I'm going to say, professional or softer skills, that we're going to look out to what others are doing there. every professional regulator deals with unauthorized practice, and there are different ways on the spectrum of dealing with that. So as you are putting together your thoughts, Judah, it might be wise to reach out to some of the other professional regulators and see how they're handling it from an operational perspective. So that was all, just to offer that.
Absolutely. And the nearest comparator are the ones that have already been identified of other legal service providers. And there are a range, and there are varying degrees of success based on regulator, but also based on the statute, which is not universal in terms of what the grant is. And this is a very unique regulatory structure which has its limits in terms of how far we are able to police some of this area. And so that's part of the discussion we'll have to continue.
Exactly.
I was just a simple point. Hey, Judah, do you think we could bookmark this for, our next board meeting, just to see if there's any progress update, or at least at some board meeting in the future, so that we can at least circle back to this?
Yeah, it'll definitely be part of the board's ongoing work through this year. I'm not sure. I don't want to promise a time for a general policy framework yet, just given some of the other operational pieces that are on the go at the moment. But this is for sure on the burners and not coming off of the burners. It's part of the reality of being in this regulatory space. We need to keep our eye on this, given that there may be cases that continue to come our way, and we need to be able to approach them.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for that, and good discussion. And obviously, the response isn't lukewarm. They would like the board. You're hearing from the board that they'd like regular reports on your progress on this issue, and that's actually, that doesn't surprise me. Okay, so that's all then we have now on the formal agenda. And I want to just ask, I do not have any other business on the agenda that I would like to propose. Does anyone else have any issue that they'd like to raise right now under the rubric of other business before we go in camera for our the next part of our meeting? No? Okay, well, this concludes the public portion of the Board of Directors meeting. I'd like to thank everybody for participating, and those who may have participated online or who may be reviewing the meeting at a later date. Thank you very much for your interest, and we'll now move in camera with the board and the CEO. Thank you.